Welcome to the Geek podcast, where BJ is living that jet-setting lifestyle. I'm Void. I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I did fly, didn't I?
Did you? I actually didn't know that. I thought you might have driven, but I was going to go with it anyway. Today we're talking about, well, we're kind of catching up because, like we mentioned last episode, we've been time shifted because BJ was traveling.
I was, and it's weird to be here again, you know, sitting and doing this after so long of being like, anytime I take a week off from this, I'm sure you're the same way, like it throws everything off. Like, I don't know how to, like, what to set up. I don't know where my notes should be on my desktop. It's just messes me up, man.
Okay. I don't think I feel as off, but I've been doing production professionally for a long time. So it's always a little weird coming back to it after multiple weeks. This was just 1 week, though. It wasn't that big of a deal.
It was just 1 week, I know. But I was far away. So I was completely removed from everything normal for a week. So that's why it feels like so much longer for me.
Yeah. So we both probably have a bunch of geekery. But first, like, just as a quick main topic, what did you do? How was it?
So we went and visited Austin and his family in Florida. Y'all have listened to the Dragon Quest episode that he and I did a few months ago while Void was out. You've probably seen me talking to him on Twitter, but we used to work together, and so now we're buddies, and with his family living like an 18-hour drive away, we decided to fly down and visit. So like, we usually only get to see each other in person about once a year, maybe twice if they come up for Christmas, and so we were really excited to be able to go down because they have 2 one-year-old twins and then a 3-year-old daughter who we just love and adore. And so we get to go hang out with the kids, who are delightful. And man, at this age, they are very loud, and way louder than they were the last time we were there. And I love them, but man, they can scream. We went down there. We get a free place to stay, like, which is awesome because we're going there. We get a free beach vacation, so we can actually afford to fly down and not really worry about it. It's just delightful to do that. So because we're like really close buddies and we geek out a lot, like we got to play video games together, which we never get to do. Like, we get to sit around and do the dumb stuff that we used to do when we lived in the same town, and so it was awesome because I finally got to see actual Dragon Quest builders, like the game that's beyond the demo, and it solidified to me that I want nothing to do with this game.
Okay.
Like, sitting there watching him play it, like the building stuff looks super neat. Like, the exploration that he was doing, I loved watching that. But the first boss is like a giant golem, you know, the big stone golem guys. He was dumb. Like, it wasn't even fun to watch to play. Like, I can't even imagine how not fun it is to actually be the one controlling it. And like, he is stupid hard. And then I went and looked up what the other bosses were. I'm just hoping they change that for Dragon Quest Builders too. Like, it was stupid. So with that, after we did that, like, we actually ended up buying, before I went down there, the Final Fantasy TCG. We bought 2 starter decks for this. Have you played it or heard of it or anything?
I've heard of it, but I've never actually looked at it, except that, well, you have a note here too, but I heard that it's similar to Magic.
It is really similar to Magic. Like, he found it kind of on a whim and saw that there were some cheap decks on eBay, and he was like, hey, I bought the Final Fantasy 12 one. You should buy one and we should play when you're down here. And I'm like, I can throw $6 at that. So I did, and I bought the Final Fantasy 14 deck. And so we learned how to play, and I didn't realize that this was a game that was like on its 8th edition. That it's been going for a long time. And there is actually a singles market for it that we were looking at, and he bought some foil cards because they were cheap and pretty. And basically, if you like art books and Final Fantasy art, this is something that you should look into. You get a relatively large amount of Final Fantasy art relatively cheaply. There we go. And like, it's pretty. It's got like pictures from all the different games and different styles, even things like Theatrhythm. But it was actually fun to play. It was a little more strategic than like Magic combat because you only attack with one character at a time. And if like you damage them, then the attack is over. You can only take 1 point of damage no matter what, even if the person has like 5,000 power, which is what some of them do or more. It's like you only take 1 damage because you take 7 damage to lose. So you have to get hit 7 times. But if you block it, and they have another attacker coming through, they can attack you again, and you have to choose to either let it through or block it. Like, it's interesting on both sides how you have to kind of play with each other's brains, like try to really screw with each other and let each other know. Like that, it was a really fun game, and I don't think there's any way that I'll keep up with it or anything, but it's fun to have a couple of starter decks to kind of throw around, you know?
Cool. Yeah. I'm kind of always up for like trying a couple starter decks or newbie decks in almost any competitive card game just for fun.
Yeah.
But it's like I rarely ever will get invested in one, which is why Magic has been such a weird thing for me that I'm actually into it lately.
Yeah, like as crazy into it as you got into that and me, I haven't actually played Arena because I've been out of town, but this was not one of those games that hooked me like that. But man, it was so cool looking at all of the different cards. Like, I just love the cards. This is the kind of game that I would buy as a collector just to see how they put everything together, because they are actually really, really pretty cards and art, like really, really nicely made cards too. They're very thick cardstock. Additionally, like, we went down and like he has been talking for months about buying a Japanese Metal Slime 2DS so that he can play Dragon Quest 11 on in Japanese. Neither of us reads Japanese or anything, mind you. This isn't somebody who's learned hiragana and can read most of what's on the screen or anything. No, like we are not able to do that. But he ordered it while I was there because he was able to get the limited edition Slime 2DS. Metal Slime from Dragon Quest and Dragon Quest 11 for about $140, $49-ish. So it got delivered while I was down there. So we got to play with like Google Translate, the app that translates real time, to figure out how to set up a Japanese 3DS and then start playing Dragon Quest 11 while like I was like holding the real-time app over it to figure out what some of the characters were saying and what all the menu items were. It was the weirdest thing because the Translate app is really hit or miss. I mean, if you've ever tried the Google Translate real-time translation, it is odd with some of the things that it says, but it let us get through and do that. And holy cow, is Dragon Quest 11 pretty on the 3DS. It is by far the best looking 3DS game I've ever seen.
Cool. You guys were dedicated. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we're nuts. That's one thing that is nuts. I've been wanting to see it, though. I've seen videos of it, and I'm like, oh, it can't look that good in person. It can't, but it can. Like, that's the thing. It looks like a lower resolution version in 3D as you play it of the PS4 game. Really, the main difference that I noticed as we were going through it is that the multiple levels, like you would have towns that had multiple levels and tiers where the houses were on, like, you had a low tier, a mid tier, and a higher tier that just kind of went up and down as you went around. They were all on one flat level, like RPG towns tend to be in most of them. So it was that kind of concession you make for the 3DS. But other than that, it was like super cool. Like, I really enjoy getting to see that. And now I really can't wait for the Switch version to play that 2D version that you see on the bottom screen. Because you really do see the 3D on top and then the 2D on the bottom screen at the exact same time as you're playing. It is hard to get used to.
That sounds super
Weird.
cool, though. Yeah.
It is super cool.
I'm glad you got to try it.
Me too. It's worth paying $150 for. Like, I'm really having to stop myself from doing that because it's silly for me to when I can actually borrow it from somebody I know when he finishes it. But it's like, kind of want to do that because that game looks really cool. But anyway, we also bought Mario Party on the Switch while we were down there because Jennifer and I have been wanting it, but like we didn't want to just buy it and not have anybody to play with. So we ended up buying it down there and playing 4-player Mario Party on the Switch a bunch. And it's really good. Like, this is a really good version of Mario Party. And we did a lot of the boards and stuff like that late at night. And I learned that Austin is the most competitive person I know and really truly hates RNG. Like, when there's randomness in there that you can't control no matter what you do, man gets angry. It's He gets to be a very angry man at Mario Party. He was not happy with the random stuff that was going on, and we were all just laughing and having a great time. And so that was great. Jennifer and I have been playing it since we got home. It's been super good to be able to have that game. And have you played the Switch version?
Yeah, no, I played it a bunch with my kids right when it came out. My kids still play it. I don't really, but yeah, I know the game really well.
So have you played the River Rapids part of it much?
Yeah, it's kind of fun a little bit, and then you've seen it all. But yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how we felt too, how Jennifer and I did. Like, we didn't want to do it just the two of us, but when you have 4 people trying to do that at the same time, and like, guys, if you haven't played it or seen it, it is, instead of being on a board to play mini games, you are using the Joy-Cons like they're oars in a rowboat, and there are 2 of you on a side, and you have to control the rowboat going around rapids and rocks and obstacles and up and down waterfall, not up waterfalls, but down waterfalls. It's really hard, and it made us forget that there were 3 babies asleep upstairs, and I think we woke them up at one point.
Whoops.
Like, that's the only time, like, all week long, we were so careful about playing games, but Mario Party River Rapids made us all completely forget about it, and then we're like, did we just wake up Nora? It's like, I think we did. And so it was fun to do that. But so we geeked out a ton on this.
That's awesome.
And then, like, during this, like, I also got to travel. Like, we've been down there a few times. Like, this is like the 3rd or 4th trip that we've made down there to visit and stay with them for different amounts of time. And so we knew the area. We got to go to like the beautiful intercoastal beach and the restaurants that we like. And but while we were down there, I got to go to the Florida Keys for the first time, and I adored that place. That I want to go back to the Keys so badly. That it was so much better than I thought it was going to be. His aunt and uncle own a houseboat. They said it was a trawler, but I don't actually know what a trawler is, and they live on it, and there are rooms. So it's a houseboat to me, even though it's not boxy and technically classified as a houseboat. But they live there, and they took us out on the ocean, which was my first trip out on the ocean. And it was just beautiful. Like, I've never seen water that clear. That it was a beautiful sunny day. I texted my work pictures of it with us on the boat on the ocean with no land in sight. I was like, hey, how's y'all's week going? And in my work Slack, and like, it was so much fun. And then we went to this little beach on the Keys, and it was the clearest water I've ever seen there. Like, this water, like, it was it was like a perfect picture out of a movie. Like, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, that's what this place looked like, even though I know that was Hawaii. But it was just like this beautiful like white sand beach and this crystal clear water. And like, I saw this little crab. As I took a step, I almost stepped on this crab that ran away under the water, like doing his little crab thing. And it looked like this gold and blue crab. It looked like Tamatoa from Moana, you know, the big crab that sings. And like, it looked like him. Like, it was so cool looking. And then just a little bit after that, like, I was walking back up toward shore, toward the beach at one point, and this guy yelled, one of the other people who happened to be there, it was a kid, actually, probably a teenager, and was like, there's a shark! And I was like, what? We're like, what? Everybody's looking, and all of a sudden, this like 3 to 4 foot long nurse shark just comes swimming through. It's just kind of doing its thing, not paying attention to anybody, swimming like right up next to the people who were there. And we watched it. We could see it just perfectly as it went. And it went off over outside of the part that was cordoned off. And then a few minutes later, like, it came circling back around. Like, it was just chilling with us in there, didn't mess with anybody. We were all out in the water and everything. And it was just really awesome to say that we've literally swum with the sharks. It was really creepy, but it was like, I'm kind of scared to go back out into the water, but it's like, kind of want to go back out into the water. There's a shark there. And it's also the first time I got a sunburn in like the last 15 years.
That's crazy to me. You and I talked about this the other day before you left when it was like a nice day here. And I think it's just a weekend. And I was like, yeah, I went outside a little bit. And you were talking about how much you go out in the sun. And you didn't realize that, like, I just burn. Like, I go from pale to burn. Those are my only two states. I don't tan ever. So, yeah, I can be outside in the sun without sunscreen for like 20 minutes maybe. But I can feel myself burning in that time. And you said you just, like, don't.
I don't. Like, I run when I'm running, and I'm running outside every day. I don't put sunscreen on or anything like that, and I never burn. I've run, like, training for the halves and everything. I have run every day, no, like, hours on end outside, never burned. Like, it just turns into tan. And this is the first time that I've gotten a sunburn in 15-ish years, and it's on my shoulders. I got a little bit on my chest, and for one day it was on my face, but it took about 4.5 to 5 hours total between being on the boat in the ocean and then being at the beach in the water on the ocean with it reflecting up on both places, and in the pool every day in the afternoon for a couple of hours. It took that to get me to have a sunburn that lasted about 2 days on my shoulders. That I wasn't really that bad, but I'm so not used to it, so I was mildly uncomfortable all the time, and I hated it. It like, it didn't peel or anything. Like, it's already just about gone now. Like, you can't see it. It's all tan now, but it was like crazy that much sun, no sunscreen whatsoever.
Oh, none of that
lasted.
With any sunscreen? Okay, I have zero. None. No, I have no sympathy for you whatsoever.
Yep, exactly. That's the thing. I was talking to Grace, and Grace is Austin's wife, and she is dark complected and like tanned and just this this beautiful tan, beautiful skin, and she doesn't do anything either because she doesn't worry about it. And she and I were both talking about how I never put on sunscreen. I just don't do anything about it. It's like, yeah, here I am, and it's like that's the way I approach it. It's like I never burn. I was like I figured I would get red because I hadn't been out in the sun that much yet, but I had enough of a tan. I figured it was a good enough base, and I was right. I got a minor sunburn, and it was fine, but I had zero sunscreen on the entire trip and doing all that.
Wow. Yeah, I could go out, in normal Minnesota sun without a reflective ocean for 30 minutes, and I will be red. Like, it happens to me all the time, so no sympathy whatsoever.
Yep. Oh, I know. Oh, no. I was not expecting sympathy. I was expecting mocking.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh, you poor baby. You got mildly uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Because that's kind of how I felt. It's like, I can't move my shoulder. Like it was like that. But like, this trip was great. This is the first time I've been down there where everything just kind of clicked, and I understood why people live in places like Southern Florida with like dealing with hurricanes and all of that, where it was nice because we weren't really necessarily vacationing. We went to the zoo and things like that because I go to the zoo everywhere I go whenever I can, but it was the first time like I was like, oh, this is just nice to live here, just to be here and do this stuff like what they do day in and day out. It was just super nice, and so I really envy people who are able to live in that climate all the time. Like, the cost of living is still super high down there. I mean, it's North Palm Beach, Florida, so West Palm Beach and all of that. So it's just right there. It's very expensive cost of living compared to where we are now. But man, it was super fun, and I'm so glad we were able to go down there just at this time of year. It was perfect. On top of getting to play lots of video games and hang out and stuff
Exactly.
like that.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that the trip went well, and I'm glad you had fun, and we were able to record ahead of time, so nobody missed out on an episode while we were gone.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah. Well, I have a bunch of geekery, and I know you have some other stuff too that wasn't directly related to your trip. But before we do that, let's dive into our geeky offer of the week. We are trying something different this week with Podcoin. You understand it better than I do. I'm still wrapping my head around it, but it seems pretty cool. So why don't you tell people about it?
Okay, so Podcoin is really neat. I found this app, and you can find it at podcoin.com, and on Twitter, they are at Podcoin app. And what this is a normal podcast player that you can listen to, and they actually pay you for listening to podcasts. And I know that sounds like one of those, like, oh, we'll pay you for listening to podcasts, but it legit works. And you earn points every, I think, 10 minutes that you listen to a podcast through their player, and then you can redeem, and they're called pod coins, and you can redeem those coins for either gift cards for yourself, or you can donate that much those coins to charity, and they will pay that much to the specific charity that they've chosen that month. And so if you join and do this, you can just listen straight up like you do with any other podcatcher that you have, but you can also earn while you're doing it. And if you sign up and use the code GEEK, GEEK, you will get an extra 300 pod coin, and so will we. So it's a really neat thing, and it's just it's kind of social, and I've really enjoyed being on there so far. It's a good experiment, and I've liked the results so far, especially getting a lot of new listeners, I think, there. So y'all try it out. Let me know what you think about it. I can't wait to hear what you say.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see how it works and if people like it. And the other thing is we're always trying to expand the community without going too fast or too big, or paying straight up for advertising, because that's not something that we ever want to do. But we want more people, because like the community that we have is fantastic. So this is one of those ways where it seemed like another way that we can get the word out there by using a different service. So we're going to try it and see how it goes. Yeah, try out Podcoin and let us know what you guys think and if it's something we should keep doing. Around the network this week on Geekitude, you were on Geekitude. I didn't know you were going to be on there.
We recorded it so long ago before Joe had to turn into a robot, and then that happened and finally got everything back to go. So we recorded a long time ago. Like, it was super fun. It was like the third time I've been on the show, and we didn't realize it had been like 2 years since I had.
Yeah, you were out of town, and then suddenly you were just like in my ears. It was weird.
I'm always there.
That's creepy. Don't say that. And then the other episode of Geekitude that came out while you were away basically was cosplaying for charity with Rob. So Rob from the Comic Box jumped over there, or Rob from Sometimes Rob, I should say. And then Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea, they had an episode on John Wick. Sometimes Rob podcast, he did his own episode about Endgame. So the first one he did a couple weeks ago was his wife's impressions, and then this was just his thoughts straight up. Capsule J, of course, is streaming Tuesdays from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, sometimes on Thursdays and weekends, and Troidal is streaming Thursdays and sometimes randomly after dinner. What else do we have for the Geekery this week?
For those of you who don't know, we have a blog on the Geek to Geek Media Network site, and if you go there, you will find Austin's Dragon Quest, which is this week talking about Dragon Quest IV Chapter 5. So it's a 6-part series now, wrapping up talking about Dragon Quest IV, and the 13th story is very appropriate this week is about learning to love RNG. So it was a very good read, and a good one to read after Mario Party the other night. So you can find those both at geek2geekmedia.com/geekery.
Sweet. And with that, it's time for Weekly Geekery, where we share what we've been geeking out about this week. What did you do besides all the stuff that you already talked about?
Oh, more me.
Yeah.
Yay. I've been playing
If you guys don't know, I always make him go first because I have the ability to scale myself to the time remaining. He doesn't have that ability in the same way.
I do not. That is one thing that I love about you and being able to do it, because I cannot at all do that. Ever. Like, I've never had that ability. So I've been playing a lot of Dragon Quest IX, and it is really, really good. Remember when we were doing our RPG job systems episode, and I said people had talked about this being like the best job system ever in a video game? Like, I can see why they say that. I don't think it's the best job system ever, but I totally understand why they say it, because I think it's one of the most customizable that you can have. Because instead of taking just an ability or two, you know how you get to pick like what command you want in Final Fantasy V, or in Final Fantasy XIV, you get all of these certain cross-class abilities, or in Bravely Default, you get to pick a couple of different abilities to stick with based on your subclasses.
Yeah.
This one is, instead of taking just those like small subclass type things to cross-class, any ability that you gain from skill point investment from in Dragon Quest games, you usually go from 0 to 100 with every so often at different intervals giving you either a passive stat boost or an ability. Every time you gain a passive stat boost or an ability from skill point investment, you carry all of them over to all of your other classes. So if you go in and you put 100 points in swords, you can be a mage that uses Giga Slash or whatever as with a sword, but you can also have the range, and every class has a unique tree, as well as the 4 weapon classes that they can use. You can be a shield-wearing, axe-wielding gladiator who has all of the paladin and mage abilities and everything else, ranger, whatever you want, that can steal like a thief. Like anything that you can learn can be carried over to all of your other classes.
That sounds really customizable, but also a little overwhelming in like probably not the best way.
It is so overwhelming because I find myself like, I'm 30 odd hours into it now. I'm probably over 30 at this point, and I'm fairly well through I'm probably 60 to 70% through the storyline, I would say, just based on what has happened so far. But a lot of my time has been just spent in dungeons, like grinding on metal slimes, because I find myself being like, oh, this would go really, really well if I had this martial artist ability on my gladiator or something like that. It's really addictive for that. But it's fun. That's the thing. It's like, I want to do this. I don't feel like I have to, because you absolutely don't have to go overboard to beat the game. It's just something that I'm finding a lot of enjoyment with. So I do understand why people say it's the best job system ever. I think that I like Bravely Default better, just in terms of like smoothness and polish and that kind of thing. But it's a very good one, and it is completely different from all the other ones in the Dragon Quest series. So it's fun, and I'm really loving this game.
It sounds like it would be a really good podcast game. Like those ones where I just kind of like zone out and listen to a podcast, but there's like something a little bit of active to do with like my hands and my mind. I am not in the mood for that game, that specific game, or that Dragon Quest, or that kind of grinding at the moment. But I just mention it because there are other people out there that might be in that mood, and it sounds like it would be a good fit for that type of thing.
It is perfect for that. Like if we're watching YouTube or Dr. Pimple Popper or Vet Ranch or something like that on TV, that's what I'm doing. Is I'm usually just running around killing things, hitting a button here and there. Finding metal slimes, whatever, or like we were watching the new season of Nailed It, and while we were doing that, I was just running around looking for slimes, that kind of thing, like it just to get a few more skill points here and there. It's great for that kind of thing. I also found out, like speaking of Nailed It, we were watching the third season last night. There is a person from my hometown here, the town I live in, who got on there and ended up winning. And like, it was a college student here, and I'm just like, we haven't heard about this. Like, this is a small enough town that when something like that happens, you hear about it. Like, nobody talked about this college student going on to a Netflix game show and winning. It was just like, it was odd, but I was like, yeah, good for her. But found that out last night, saw that episode. And then I also finally got a chance to play with the Bit Boy.
Oh yeah, that sounded super cool when you told me about it.
Like, it is really, really neat. It is a small handheld. It's BITT Boy. It's a small handheld, and it fits literally in my hand. Like, it is the size of my palm. And it has a small screen on it, and it runs on, I think, a Raspberry Pi with a custom, it's not quite, I don't think it's RetroPie, but they have that. It runs on something like that. And it's an emulator is what it is it runs ROMs. And so I'm able to play these like fan translated ROMs that I wouldn't be able to play otherwise. And so I've got them on there to be able to play. Like I've always wanted to actually finally get through the first Star Ocean and go back and play Tales of Fantasia and stuff like this, and Seiken Densetsu 3. I'm really excited to do that, and it works really well. Like it works perfectly well actually with save states. It comes with all the emulators preloaded on there, and this one even has a PS1 emulator on it, but I haven't loaded anything on that one yet to try it because I just don't understand how this thing is powerful enough to emulate PS1. But it's awesome so far. I'm really, really enjoying it. Playing some of the old, playing some of the Japanese games that got translated, and some of the older Game Boy and Game Boy Color games that I've missed that are also making me like ones that I have but don't want to actually pull out an old console for to be able to play. So like it's really cool, and I got it for $50, and it had a 8 GB micro SD card with it, so which is plenty fine for this kind of thing. It was very good deal. I'm very happy with it. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool. That sounds super cool. Yeah, let me know what else you end up playing on it, because that's the one thing. Like I always see stuff like that, and I don't know, like the nostalgia hits me first. I'm like, oh yeah, like old games, like I want to see other ways to play them, and then I actually stop and think, and I'm like, wait, what would I actually spend time like playing on it? And that's where I always kind of stop myself. But if you get hooked on a bunch of games and you think it's worthwhile, like I would give that thing another look.
It's really good for RPGs, like retro RPGs, because the only thing I have a problem with so far is that it doesn't have a sleep mode. So but it has save states. So you save state immediately, then just flip it off and come back on because it's an almost immediate boot up again. But I've had a lot of fun doing that with like older RPGs that I've actually seen on Twitter, people playing and wanting to go play. Things like the old Final Fantasy Legend, or like the first Dragon Quest Monsters on Game Boy Color, things like that I honestly want to give a playthrough and don't happen to have a Game Boy lying around. But I want to have those games. So it's been fun playing, and like Donkey Kong Country runs really well on it. Yoshi's Story I've had a lot of fun playing. A lot of these old platformers work really, really well on it.
Cool. No, that's very cool.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I didn't travel anywhere exciting like you did in the last week, but I have been picking away at Geekery stuff. I tried the Assassin's Creed Odyssey Fate of Atlantis DLC, which, have you seen that? Like, have you looked at the Battle Pass for Odyssey at all?
No, I haven't.
Or I don't know if it's Battle Pass. It's the DLC Season Pass. That's the word I was looking for. This is like one of the last things in it. So I know I talked about some of the other DLCs when those came out, and it's just because like I spent the extra, I think it was like $10 when I bought the game to get like the digital deluxe edition, which had the pass in it anyway. And that's why I got the Assassin's Creed 3 remaster for free because I had already paid for it. Yeah. So this one ties into the Atlantis stuff, which was like one of my favorite parts of Odyssey. So I was super excited about it. And unfortunately, there's some like dumb stuff they do right away. So there's like these tedious fetch quests that you have to do before you can get to the actual new content. And it was like, okay, well, that's kind of a drag of an hour or two. And then once you actually get into it, the premise is interesting. The gameplay, maybe not so much. So the premise is you can go to the Greek underworld through simulations from your alien friends, which I know I've talked about the aliens before in Assassin's Creed. Yeah, if you guys have never beaten one, there's definitely aliens, and they play a major impact on the overall story of Assassin's Creed. But one of them lets you go into these simulations, which put you in like the Greek underworld. And this first DLC chapter is in Elysium, which is really super interesting. Like right when you go into it, it's like, oh, it's a different setting, and it has a really cool look and feel to it. The problem that I ran into pretty quick was that the gameplay is just reskinned enemies, but exactly the same gameplay. Like they do a little bit differently. Like they try to change it up, but it's DLC, right? It's not a new game. They're not like fundamentally changing anything about it. So I didn't really want to play it. Like I explored a little bit, and then I was like, I've played this game for probably 60, 70 hours already. Like I don't think I need this, but I am interested in the story. So this is one of those where I might go back and just watch all of the DLC cutscenes from this expansion on YouTube, which I don't do very often. But yeah, overall, I think that this let me know that like I'm officially done with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'll probably go back to waiting until the next actual mainline Assassin's Creed game comes out, because I've just gotten my fill. Like, you know, if it's just going to be the same gameplay, just reheated and rehashed over and over, I think I need to be done with it.
So even dealing with the Atlantis stuff, you feel that way?
Yeah, the Atlantis stuff that was wrapped into the main game was super interesting for me, and it looks like this is trying to take that another step farther. I just don't want to push through the same gameplay over and over, because it opens it up and it's like, oh, you have to go and like swing the I don't even remember, like it's been a while since I played the game, but it's the control over the area, like the territory control, you know, like defeating the leaders, like completing the objectives in the open world.
Right.
I did that so many times in the main game. I don't need to do that again just because you gave me another setting in the DLC. It's the exact same gameplay. So that's the part that's holding me back. But that's why I also want to probably just watch all the cutscenes, because I do care about the story.
That I understand. That was what I was really curious about, is the Atlantis stuff, because I know that was the story was what pushed you through the last bit of the game itself. So I was curious if it was enough to like get you to consider doing that again.
It did. I mean, I probably played 3-4 hours of it, something like that. So it pushed me into a little bit, but not enough to finish it, if that says something. Yeah. So I moved away from that, and then I just started kind of thinking, like, it's been a light year for video games so far. And it's, you know, I think it's probably because the next gen hardware is coming. And the other thing that got me thinking about this was it's almost time for our episode where we always do our mid-year episode and we cover like the best of the first half of the year. And that's always a super fun one to do, because if you don't do something like that, by the time you get to the end of the year, you forget so much of what happened in the first 6 months of the year. And so that's one where we do a little bit of everything, right? And like the end of the year, we actually do a specific like games of the year podcast, and then we do like best of the rest, like everything else from the year. When we do our midway one for the year, we just throw everything together, because there's usually not quite enough games at that point, but there's enough to talk about. And I don't know, like video game wise, what would even make the cut for me at this point. I mean, Magic the Gathering Arena, because I've been playing a lot of that.
Obviously, yeah.
But outside of that, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, I'll go back through my list and try to pick it out, but it really has felt like a pretty light gaming year for me so far, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of just stuff that has come out and blown either of us just away, and none of it has been like super spectacular. A lot of the stuff that I've bought has either been a re-release or an indie game that was good enough, or something that is a retro game that I'm really excited about, but not anything like actually new, really. I think maybe Steamroll Quest was one of the better ones I actually got.
Yeah, but you saying it with like that tone of voice. Like it's not jumping out, you know? And I think almost all of the like high profile releases so far this year have either been ones where I was disappointed with it, like Anthem. Like I really wanted to like Anthem. It didn't pan out. It wasn't the game I wanted it to be. And that's okay. Like I moved on. I know other people still like it, and that's fine. It just wasn't for me. And then all of the other like high profile release games are just ones that I was never interested in the first place, you know? And a lot of them are just like, yeah, that's a video game. Like I know exactly what's going to be in that. I don't want to spend my time on it. Or it's just a genre that I just completely don't care about. So I've kind of, you know, skipped over it. The balance of this is that I feel like this year so far, I've gotten to do a lot more digging into games that I'm having fun with, because there's not always something like shiny and new. So that's probably one of the reasons that I've gone as deep into like Magic and Magic the Gathering Arena as I have, is because of that. So it's not all a bad thing. It's just kind of an interesting observation that I had going into this part of the year. And
yeah, because usually, like I remember, I think it was last year where we were talking in, I think February or March-ish, about March-ish, about April, when everything was coming out, that we were just getting slammed with too many things to keep up with. And this year I'm just looking at what's come out and what's upcoming, and like the Switch has a fantastic year coming up for it, but in like the immediate future, I can't think of a whole lot of, I can think of like two really awesome games that I'm really super looking forward to, and one of them doesn't have a release date.
Yeah, and I have to think that it's because of next gen hardware. I bet all of the ones that are like really big budget games are just waiting until PS5 and Xbox 2, whatever, get announced. Or Nextbox. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
I don't know why I'm thinking that they're going to call it Xbox Nexus. That's been in my head the entire time, and I have no idea why. It's nothing
Nextbox.
anyone has ever said.
Yeah, but like, I'm hoping that we'll see a lot more at E3. I mean, that's always part of it too, right? Some of the games that are the biggest at the end of the year, we don't even know exist yet because they get announced next month at E3 in June, like beginning of June. Yep. So I'm sure we'll see a lot out of that. And then the other thing is, as we're approaching summer here, there are a few new games that I'm excited for. Starting in mid-June, there's like almost one every week all the way through the end of July. So there's Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, there's Mario Maker 2, there's Final Fantasy XIV, the Shadowbringers expansion, there's Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, and then there's Fire Emblem 3 Houses. And like all of those I'm super pumped about in different ways and to different extents. But at least I was looking ahead and I was like, do I just not like video games? Because I know that's not the case, right? But I'm like, it was more that I'm looking ahead kind of like, what am I actually excited for this year? And I was like, okay, there's a bunch. It's just later in summer. It's just been a really oddly quiet first half of the year.
Yeah, it really has. And even the second half of the year, I can't think of anything other than Nintendo games that I'm really excited about. I say Nintendo games, I should say Switch games, because I can't think of anything that's not on the Switch that I'm interested in. Well, Persona Q2 is on the 3DS, but it might as well be.
That's another Nintendo system, though.
That's a Nintendo system, yeah. Like, I can't think of anything because, like, Bloodstained is going to be on there, and I want to play it. I don't care about Mario Maker 2, but I'm glad that it's coming out for the people who like it. I'll get Shadowbringers eventually, and, like, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, I'm in on day one. Like, I'm really excited about that one. And I'm already torn on Fire Emblem 3 Houses, so I'm actually going to have to watch some gameplay on it to see if I'm going to pick that one up early on or wait. But it's like, I'm excited for Astral Chain, and like, I can't wait for E3 to come around because of the announcements like the Final Fantasy VII remake, which I haven't actually gotten your take on, speaking of upcoming games, and I'm really curious about that one.
I don't know. Looks okay, I guess. Like,
fair enough.
I'm very middling on it. I don't feel like we've seen enough for me to actually have any kind of opinion. And there are people that just want to straight up remake and keep the same system. And I think that would be boring. Like, if you're going to remake the whole game to the extent that they are, you might as well reinvent the battle system. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of all Square Enix games going towards that action type battle system. I really would like them to do like a high-end main release Final Fantasy or otherwise that's like a turn-based game again that's not Dragon Quest. And they just aren't doing that. Like, they seem to be taking like Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, and everything is going towards this action combat, where I don't have anything against action combat. I just don't want absolutely everything to be that. So, you know, I'm a little apprehensive there, but I don't think it's a huge disservice to the game, and I'll play through it. I mean, even if I don't like the combat, you can always crank it down to easy and just play through it for the story. But one way or another, I mean, I like Final Fantasy enough that, like, yeah, I'm gonna play that game when it comes out.
And I've been thinking, like, I'm calling it, and I'm sure I'm gonna be wrong, but I would not put it past them, with talking about upcoming games, that I would not put it past them to have episode 1 of it ready enough here to announce it for 7/7 this year, and announce that at E3 that it's going to launch on 7/7 of this year, just to get episode 1 out.
I don't believe that, just because Square Enix has been really bad at getting out Final Fantasy games lately. Like, I wouldn't complain. I would like it, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath, but for some reason, when I was like, yeah, I could see them doing that, because they've gotten such bad press about stuff lately. Like, here, take this, you love us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get a bunch of game announcements at E3, but also PlayStation is pulled out of E3, so there's no PlayStation this year. There's no Sony.
Oh.
And did you not know that?
I actually didn't know they'd pulled completely out. I thought they had reduced their presence. I didn't know they'd pulled all the way out.
No, they're not at E3 this year. So, I mean, you know, they're probably holding back for the PS5, which makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So I think the real question is, when we hear about E3 this year and all the game releases or all the game announcements, is are there going to be many games that are announced at this year's E3 that are actually out in the next 12 months? Because I really doubt it. I think most of what we're going to see is going to be for next-gen hardware, whether they say it or not. And that means probably fall of next year, because all signs point to fall of 2020 is when the PS5 comes out, which means that the Xbox 2, what should I call it in the meantime? I'm going to call it Xbox 2 because I find that funnier. The Xbox 2 is... See, it made myself laugh. It's a good sign. The Xbox 2 is probably going to come out either like really soon before it or really soon after it, because that's the way that those two companies go with each other.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Almost
so
every
we'll
time.
See.
Almost every time.
But yeah. And I mean, outside of games or outside of video games specifically, I went and saw the Detective Pikachu movie because my kids really wanted to see it. Yep. So I took my kids. It's always fun to take them to the movies. You know, as a movie, it's okay.
Right.
It wasn't fantastic. I don't even know if I'd call it like good as a general movie, but for a kids movie, it's good. It's definitely on that scale, right? It's like for kids movie, I thought it was good, not great. For general movie, it was all right. It wasn't bad.
Right.
I can definitely say it wasn't bad, which is a good thing.
That's about what I expected out of it. I didn't expect some sort of masterpiece. I haven't seen it yet, but I didn't expect a masterpiece. And as long as it's not a dumpster fire,
it's not. It's definitely not a dumpster fire. So it has that going for it. The other thing is that it mostly just made me want to have a more traditional Pokemon movie, because I want that Pokemon trainer story in movie form, because like that traditional, right? Like I'm going to be the very best. I'm going to catch them. I'm going to have a bunch of battles and defeat gym leaders and work my way up to whatever, you know, the league or not, whatever you have time for in a movie form, because there was like 1.5 Pokemon actual battles in the whole movie. And they were so cool to see the moves brought to life in this art style. Like if I could have this art style and see a bunch of battles and trainers and that traditional story, like I would be so excited to see that after seeing this movie and seeing what they did for the style and the graphics and the CG basically.
And I'm not interested in that nearly as much as I am this one, because we've had that story so many times. It's why my interest waned on Sword and Shield when they announced them as being that same kind of story again, because of we've seen it so many times with Pokemon. So I'm really glad that they went this route with the first live action one. So I can't wait to see this, and I would totally be all in on whatever they did, but I'm glad they went with this one first at least.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, right? If you've seen Pokemon, if you're a huge Pokemon fan, like you should probably go see it. It's not bad. I can say that. Besides that, this week, I did a bunch more Magic, surprising nobody, because I just talked about how, you know, I've had more time to dig into it. So Magic Gathering Arena this week, you know, right back to that, like the benefits of having a lighter game year. I can dig deeper into the games that I'm actually playing. There's this deck that my daughter made that had, she's 8, and her deck had no real theme and no real strategy behind it, because she's just doing her very first deck building. And one of the things that was in the deck was she put 4 of these cards called a Charmed Stray, which is a cat. And so she built this deck, and she was asking me like what she should call it. And so I looked through it, and the only thing I could see that had any cohesiveness was those cats. So I said, what if we call it Cat Chaos? And she loved it. She just like lost it laughing. So she made the deck. You know, it has no synergy, no theme. It's no anything except that it's kind of white red, and it has these 4 cats. But she won her very first like test run playing it, and she's like, yes, this is an awesome deck. And I was like, yeah, it is. You did great. And it's super interesting because I'm in a couple of Slack channels, and a couple of different Slack chats, right? One of the channels in the one that I spend the most time in, there's an entire channel dedicated to Magic. And I'd been in there just kind of lurking for a year or two. I'm in most of the channels in that particular Slack that I'm in. But I'm participating within the last month because I'm actually playing the game. And so I mentioned this thing about my daughter's Cat Chaos deck, and it just like grabbed the imagination of the people in that Slack channel. And so a bunch of them have been building their own Cat Chaos decks, and it is the coolest thing to see like what they're coming up with that are actual viable, interesting decks that are doing fascinating things where all of the characters are some kind of cat or cat-like creature. It is amazing.
And it's funny that you said that. When you and I were talking about this before a few weeks ago, the deck that I've been working on Arena has been based around all of the cat people as well. Like, I've really enjoyed the cat people, where I even got, I can't remember his name now, like a Johnny, I can't remember. I actually even used one of my mythic rare tokens to be able to buy to craft him to be able to put him in a deck. Like, at least one of them. I'll probably get more too because he's really good, but I've really enjoyed the cats myself, just completely separated from this. But it was like, yeah, they're good. Cats are awesome.
Yeah, so it's super fun to see her getting into that. And like, I'm still just liking Arena. Like, you know, Magic, the more and more I'm playing it, the more I'm realizing that it's this like living, breathing, changing game, which is true of a lot of games I've played over time. But I think that their particular release schedule for sets is enough to keep it constantly fresh, which is something that like games as a service, you know, the video game side, I always feel like I struggle with. If I really love a game, it doesn't update fast enough to actually hold my attention.
Right.
Which is why I like kind of the more cohesive and like there's a story or there's a game where there's an experience and there's an ending. But Magic the Gathering Arena, because they're just pulling in the actual like Magic cards and those releases that happen multiple times a year. Like, you know, the next core set is coming out in July, which isn't that far away. And
oh, wow.
I got to see everything with Ravnica pretty stable before War of the Spark dropped, and then I saw all these things change, and now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm getting my head around War of the Spark, and it feels very different than it did when it was just the Ravnica stuff, which means that the next time they change over, it's going to feel even more different again, and that's kind of exciting for me. Like, I could see myself just like digging in and just playing this game consistently for years. I don't know about that for sure at this point, but I've been playing for like 2 months almost every day, and that's a really, really good sign. So it's just cool that it's a living, breathing game, and it's changing at a pace that I think might be fast enough but also slow enough for me. Like, it's hitting that right tone, that tempo. And then the other thing is that I'm starting to feel confident enough that I'm starting to modify decks. I'm not quite ready to make my own decks from scratch, but I am taking existing decks that I like, that I've played with a bunch, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm not clicking with this certain aspect of it, or I wish it did more of X, or I wish it did less of Y. And so I'm slowly modifying like 1 card or 2 or 4 cards at a time, and just kind of tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. So that's probably a good sign that at some point I might make my own from scratch, but I'm not quite there yet.
Which is super fun, but it is intimidating. Like, even having as much history with CCGs as I have, it's always intimidating to start out a new deck from nothing, unless you have like everything already like thought out in your head beforehand. Like, it's not the easiest thing to do. So I pretty much always start by modifying a deck and then moving into, okay, this is what I like, and then grabbing like the 4 of this and 4 of this and 4 of this kind of.
Well, and
kind of
the wild cards in Arena are such a good fit for me because like I don't have to buy physical booster packs, and I don't have to go hunt down singles and stuff like you have to in the physical game. I can just like keep playing the game, and by playing the game and like doing the in-game events that give me in-game gold for free, I will get packs, which will give me wild cards, which means I can craft any card in the game just through playing. So I love that about it.
Yeah, that is the best part about this by far, absolutely.
One of the things I did in the last 2 weeks that was the most fun was actually like physical Magic cards, which surprised me. So for Magic the Gathering, I bought those Planeswalker decks, right? And I bought from 3 different sets, and each one came with a couple boosters, but it ended up that we perfectly had enough booster packs to do a 4-person booster draft. So we did that with my kids, me, and my brother. The 4 of us just sat down and we did a booster draft together against each other. And it was so interesting, and it was so fun to like watch my kids get into it too. And like, I made a bunch of newbie mistakes for drafting. So did my kids, but my brother knows more about it than any of us do. So, you know, we played all the decks against each other, and he won because obviously he was going to win. But after that, it was the sitting down and talking it through that was like the most fun part for me, because I picked up things, but I could also tell that my daughter was totally grokking what was going on. And she was just like sitting with my brother and picking his brain and listening to what he was saying. So like her and I together, we kind of learned more about the mana curve and the balance of like creatures versus spells and all of that kind of thing. it was fun enough that I could see myself trying out a draft or a sealed event at a game store in the future if I went with my brother. I would not do it alone, but with him, I would consider doing that, which is not something that I thought that I would say, but at this point is true, and it's kind of surprising to me. I'm still not interested in constructed physically, like with the physical Magic cards. Definitely just those limited formats, because I don't want that big of a commitment, and it's too much money, and it's too much of, like I said, hunting down the singleton cards and all that kind of stuff. I might casually do constructed, though, at home, because my kids are very interested in building their own decks, and they like the physical cards. So with whatever cards we happen to have, right? And the other thing is, like, I've been listening to that Magic Drive to Work podcast, and that's kind of how Magic the Gathering was originally envisioned, was that you would just have whatever set of cards you have. Every once in a while, you buy some random boosters, and you would make your own decks and just play with the people that you know in your local area. So in a way, if I'm just playing it casually at home with not a big card pool, that's kind of fine. Like, it works.
And it's fun. That's the good thing about all of this, is that it doesn't matter if you have a good deck if both people are playing the same quality of deck like that, because you're going to have fun doing it. They can be absolute garbage, all commons of 5 different colors, but if you like doing it and you're having fun, that's what it's about to play it. I mean, you're not going to take it to a tournament or states or anything, but yeah, just being able to sit and play around with your friends, absolutely. That's like the most of what I know. That I don't know about everybody out there. That's by far probably the majority of what I've done, was just screwing around with different piles of cards that I've put together.
Yeah, so we're looking at, they have a thing called the Deck Builder's Toolkit, which is basically designed for this purpose if you're just starting to get into Magic. So it comes with like a box where you can store things in, but it comes with like 100 basic land cards. It comes with 125 core cards. And then it has a handful of booster packs in it too that are just random boosters for whatever. So I'm kind of eyeing the Ravnica Allegiances one since it's the most recent, but I'm also guessing that the Magic set, the Core 2020 set, is going to be out soon, because that one is launching soon. So probably around July. So I'm kind of looking at those like, yeah, if I get one of those, and play that with my kid, like I would buy it for my kids, and then I would play it with them. I would not be getting it for myself because I want to get super into the physical cards. It's more about like, they're into this, I'm going to play it in the format that they're having fun with.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. So again, a lot of Magic, just because like there's not a whole lot of other brand new games out there. The other thing I'm thinking about doing, which I haven't really done yet, but I might dive back into Final Fantasy 14 soon and try to play some of the patch content before the new expansion comes out. Or I picked up a little while ago Final Fantasy 9 remaster on the Switch, and I literally haven't even launched the game because like I've been just so into Magic with my free time, and I don't have that much free time either to like sit down and dig into stuff.
Also, I was going to ask if you were getting the Elder Scrolls Online elsewhere, because I think it launched today, maybe? The new expansion for it. And I know you were super into it for a while.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, I feel like I beat that game, so I don't know. I think I need to be in the right mood to go back to it. Like, I would probably want to start a new character, or I don't know. It would have to be the right hook to get me back into it, and I'm not quite in that mood at the moment.
There are really big dragons.
Dragons don't really do a whole lot for me.
What?
Yeah.
Jennifer and I were talking the other night while we were watching Game of Thrones, and I said, I love dragons. And I was like, I always forget how much I love dragons until I see a dragon, and then it's like, oh my God, I love dragons. It's just like Spider-Man. Dragons are like Spider-Man when I don't remember how much I love them until I see them. And she thought it was just so funny whenever I said that, but it was true. Also, the Game of Thrones finale, I'm assuming that you watched it.
I did. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about that since it's super new, but we are at the very like end of the episode, so we can take a couple minutes. Okay, so this is it. That's the last thing we're going to talk about, Game of Thrones finale. If you don't want to be spoiled, now's your chance to bail out. You won't miss much, I promise.
Because we're kind of bad at Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we're bad at Game of Thrones, but basically, I thought it was all right. It was okay. It wasn't fantastic. I wish that this whole season had more time to develop, which is weird for me because usually I'm the one that's like, drive that plot forward. And it just didn't seem like the writers took the time they needed to develop what happened. But now having seen the whole season, if I step back and I look at the broad strokes, it all feels fine to me. Like the broad strokes that happen, I'm okay with all of those things. It's just that like the characters needed more time to get to those places organically, whereas this season it felt like they were being pushed there because they needed to get there.
Yes. And I read a really good article about that Jennifer sent me. And by article, I mean like series of like 45 tweets that a guy had done. And it was basically saying that yes, the reason that it feels like this with the last few seasons is because we ran out of George R.R. Martin pantsing those characters, where he's, riding by the seat of his pants. The characters are doing what they do regardless of where it's going with the plot, which is the problem that some people have had with the latest book. And so, but while you had that as a source, the entire show felt organic. And then when they had an end point to get to with no characters to really drive it the way that they would be driving it like they were before, we started having a paint by numbers plot where they were hitting all of they were hitting all the high points, but we didn't have any of the fleshed out stuff between, where it swapped from a pantser story to an outliner story in the middle, and we felt it. We felt them when they started planning it, as opposed to when the characters were dictating where it went. And that was the most insightful thing that I've heard about the last few seasons, because when I thought about it, it's absolutely true that not everything made sense before.
Yeah, I saw an article where they talked about, so this was the most insightful take that I've seen. You and I have both obviously read a bunch of hot takes about this because we're interested. But it was where they were talking about how Game of Thrones was never a psychological story. It was never a story about the characters. It was a sociological story. It was a story about the systems and the institutions and what that does to the world. And it was a sociological story right up until the point where they ran out of book material, and then they had to hang it on the characters. So it shifted over to a psychological story about individual characters, which is what we're more used to. So which is kind of the same thing that you were saying, but just attacking it from a different angle. So I thought that was super fascinating.
That's a really good point too. I mean, yeah, it's the same thing that functions the same way. And I liked the finale. I mean, I'm one of the people who I would probably even defend this finale, because the things that people ended up hating about it are things that were telegraphed beforehand a lot. And this is also another finale like the Lost finale, which is also wonderful, and I will defend to the death. It's one of those where it says explicitly in the episode what led us to this point. Like whenever I don't know how many spoilers we want to actually get into because people may still be listening, but what led things to that point had been led up to for 8 seasons, and then they had, I think it was Tyrion maybe, say this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and we let that happen, and now we're here. And it's like, this was all telegraphed very clearly, and I liked it. Like, there were things I didn't like, obviously, but as far as finales go, I don't understand why people are losing their minds.
So I watched it twice, right? And there's a lot of dramatic walking in that episode.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of suspense that worked for me the first time I watched it that didn't work nearly as much the second time I watched it. And now I'm super curious that if you took a stopwatch, which I'm tempted to do, but I'm not going to because I don't have enough time to waste my time with stuff like this. But if you took a stopwatch and every time there was just dramatic walking with no talking, if you started that and stopped it, I wonder how many minutes of the episode is characters dramatically walking from one point to another, because I bet it is a lot of that episode.
I hadn't even thought about it. I haven't seen it a second time, so I'm very interested to go back and watch it again now with that in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the finale itself, I thought it was all right. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. There were parts of it that I thought were really cool, but like overall, it was in the middle for me. It's more about like the fact that we had this huge cultural event happen. Like, that's the more interesting part to me.
It was. And I just love how everybody was a part of it. Like, even like going back, like Austin doesn't watch that. He's a huge Game of Thrones fan. He's a huge Song of Ice and Fire fan, and never watched this show. Just couldn't get into it. But even he was texting me the next day, being like, "See, I told you this back in 2013. This is what was going to happen." And he was like, "Nobody believed me," and he did. Like, to be fair, he did call this, except for who was on the throne. He got that part wrong, but everything else he got right. It was just like, man, All right. But that's the thing. Everybody was into it, even people who didn't watch the show.
Yeah, it was just a huge cultural event. So that was super cool anytime there's a giant cultural event like that in any kind of like geekdom, I'm always super fascinated by it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's probably it for this week. You guys can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
We also have great discussions on Slack and Discord. You can go to geek2geekmedia.com for invite links so you can hang out with us and check out all the other content on the network.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I blog sometimes at places.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, geeks.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we are the hosts of Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. We are two best friends who love pop culture and talking about pretty much whatever we want. Katie!
Yes?
Stop thinking about Zac Efron and tell our future listeners what some of our latest episodes have been about.
Well, we've talked about Zac Efron.
No, get it together, Katie.
Fine. We've talked about fan fiction, classical literature adaptations, favorite TV couples, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.
Hello friends, this is Troidal Power inviting you to join me over on Twitch most weeknights, sometime after dinner. Video games have always been a social hobby for me, with friends and family crammed together on a couch chatting away while someone holds the controller. And thanks to the power of the internet, I've got my own virtual couch over on Twitch where you can kick back and goof off while I play games. Find me on Twitch by searching Troidal Power, that's TROYTLE Power, to snag a spot on the couch.